in Merseyside says, why are Labour rushing ahead head over heels to build 1.5 million houses? Could it be to house illegal migrants coming in? Labour will also pay their rent and rates. Well, I mean, Angela Rayner was on the TV over the course of last weekend. I don't think she'll be back for a while because she made a bit of a gaff of it all. But she was a bit confused, wasn't she? She said, one, we've got plenty of houses. Two, we haven't got enough houses. Three, we're going to be housing loads of migrants. Four, we're also going to be giving affordable housing to lots of people indigenous from this country. Yeah, honestly, it's a disgrace, not only that Angela Rayner is anywhere near government, but, yeah, that's quite to one side. That is also ridiculous. It is, but the very fact that she's able to go out there and try to parrot these lines and it be made really obvious by the interviewer. Hang on, didn't you just say this? Yes, but, yes, but... Right. The sort of the inconsistencies at the heart of Labour's policies when it comes to things like housing and immigration are clear for all to see. But they're just going to double down on this. They're just going to push ahead with it, and they're just going to imagine, because, as we said earlier, they believe that we're stupid and that they just do it for long enough we'll forget about it. Is it now a sort of government by lie? I don't think I've ever seen a government who are quite so disingenuous about the truth. Yeah, at least the Tories were honest that everything was on fire. Yeah. Give them that. I don't sit here to defend the Tories. No. I don't defend them. We were very critical of them when they were in. We were very critical of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. But at the end of the day, they didn't just barefaced lie to the public, which is what Labour seems to be doing. Do you know, the strange thing was, actually, this station was very critical of the Tories. Lots of newspapers and other stations were very critical of the Tories. Some of them, I think, were a little bit too lenient on Labour, partly because I think they didn't want to burn their contacts with them before they even got into government. But there were plenty of people, and at some stations, saying, actually, what are the details about? They're not really being very forthcoming. They seem, the figures don't seem to quite match up. We're not being given very much detail. The alarm bells were being sounded that it was simply a case of Labour already knew they'd won the election, so didn't really have to be too honest with people. Now they're in, and that is, I think, bearing out. And we see this, in the very first budget, that everything is actually ripped up and thrown up in the air and gone, well, actually, we've got to find even more money that we magically didn't have. A disaster, isn't it? It has, and as much as do you know what I thought was really quite amusing is that the pound is currently doing quite well relatively against the euro. I think it's the best since we've left the European Union or something like that. And everybody's going, well, this is an example of how Britain's economy is doing really well. We've got stable government. And you think, it's got nothing to do with the collapsing governments all across Germany and France. It's all about the euro collapsing. It's all about the euro. The pound against the dollar is actually not doing so well. Well, that's exactly the point. Against a country that is actually about to go for economic growth, because that is what's going to happen under Trump. We're not doing very well at all. And, we are insulated from what's happening in Europe, partly because of our political system, partly because we're not in the euro, although, of course, that could have very easily happened. But this idea that just because we're not quite collapsing at the same rate as them, because our system props up failing governments if they've got large majorities, that this is a good thing? No, it just means that the stagnation's going to go on even longer. We can't get rid of this government right now unless his own party decide they want to get rid of Keir Starmer, which they're not going to do because they understand how bad things are and what a can of worms that would open. They've seen what happened when the Tories did that, and that can really ruin your time in government. So we're stuck with these people for 4.5 years. I mean, I still think that something will dislodge him, and I may be wrong about that, and I take your point that, they might prefer the devil they know as far as the Labour Party is concerned, but I feel sort of in my bones that something horrible is going to happen. Let's talk about Ed Miliband, because he's been spending an awful lot of time talking about the net zero dream, and he's been quoting all sorts of experts who tell him, apparently, that bills are going to come down, that we're going to be much better off in the future if we rely on renewable energy. I think yesterday Andrew Neil, who's very good at this, was checking the national grid, and once again it was 80% of the national grid energy was supplied by gas, as opposed to renewables, which was something like 2%, because there just wasn't very much wind. But he's been quoting from the National Energy System Operator, NESO, as they are called, saying that they have, more or less, endorsed everything he said. But unfortunately for him, the CEO of that organisation was in front of a parliamentary committee this week, and here's what he said.
If she reads the NESO report, which is the advice given to us from the independent body, they show that this will lead to lower electricity bills.
Do you think that the NESO report is conclusive proof that Clean Power 2030 will bring down bills?
What we did not set out to do, and what is not our role, is to determine what bills are for consumers. That's a matter of policy.
So NISO say actually nothing to do with us how much it costs. It's up to Ed Miliband how much he charges you.
Yeah.
So Ed Miliband, again, barefaced lying to the public and in the House of Commons, making out that NISO have said to him, well, bills are going to come down.
Yeah.
And they're obviously not going to.
They're not, and that's even, that's with the revelation very recently that actually state subsidies for wind, basically, and solar to a degree, but mainly for wind, runs into the hundreds of billions over the course of, the period we've decided to invest in this. And of course, if we had decided to do the sensible thing, which almost every single energy expert says we should do, this being a country that is quite literally built on fossil fuels, we are an island made of coal and gas floating in a sea of oil. If we used that to bridge a gap between going towards nuclear, which France has done, very rare that I will say France did a very smart thing, but they absolutely did, and they get, at any one time, about 80% of their electricity comes from nuclear. If we had done that, or if we decided to do that now, we simply would not be having the price crises that we currently face, that is forcing businesses to go under, that is stopping other people from starting.
I got an email the other day from my power supplier saying, Happy Christmas, we're putting the prices up again in January. I mean, that's effectively what they said. They took about 85 paragraphs to say it, but that's what they're doing.
They frame it by saying your prices are changing. They never lead by saying it's going up. It's never, it's going down. If it was going down, they'd leave with it. Your prices are changing. Right, that's what that means. Then. Okay, here we go. And honestly, the idiocy about our energy policy. We had this 10 years ago with the Lib Dems when they said it's going to take 10 years to build the nuclear reactors, and you're just like, oh, that's painful. But to then know that and still double down on this incredibly wasteful, inefficient form of energy when it comes to wind, or an industry that is run by China because they they manufacture all the solar power, and is also one of the 3 countries on Earth literally worst positioned to make the most of it, along with Sweden and Norway, because the sun doesn't rise for half of the year. We are uniquely ill-positioned to make the best of solar power. These are the 2 that we're deciding to double down on. There's a future for solar. I'll take that in the summertime. Yes,
maybe
fine. On your roof,
maybe,
but not on the fields, and not as one of your main sources.
No,
it's an addendum. It
not as part of the national grid.
Absolutely not.
If you want to be like individually self-sufficient, I know people who have called this show and have spoken to me about how they can actually do quite well out of getting solar panels on their house, but only if they were given a grant to put them on there in the first place.
Exactly.
Because if you actually have to pay to put them on, it takes you a very long time to get the money back.
And that's your personal house. You're never going to run a shipyard or anything. Not that we have these things anyway, because we've closed them because it's not.
No, but you can't exactly run Canary Wharf or this building from your house. Anyway,
it's
piece in the Sun this morning. The mad dash to net zero by 2030 will lead to higher bills and risk possibly 1 million jobs. And that's a warning that's coming from all sorts of people who know better than us exactly what the problem is. Andy Mayer of the Institute of Economic Affairs said, you can't make energy cheaper by deliberately making it more expensive. It's a pretty obvious thing to say, isn't it?
And there shouldn't be the ability for government ministers to just continue to parrot the idea about net zero being the most important thing. Because, as I said, nuclear is net zero. Nuclear is clean, nuclear is efficient, and once you've got it set up, it's very expensive in the short term to build. Obviously, it's a security threat, but once it's there, it's very affordable. The fact that we've decided not to go down this route and that we haven't made the most of the fossil fuels that we do have to keep those energy prices down in the meantime, it's just scandalous. And, it is making us poorer. There's no other way of putting it. If you're upset about your bills...
We're wasting more and more money on energy.
And it's not just your energy bills. That's the point. Your food bills are expensive because it costs more to grow things.
Yes, of course.
Your houses are partly more
When you go to the pub, it costs more to get a pint of beer because the energy prices are going up. Let's get a voice note from James on house building.
Morning, Mike. Jamie from Hornchurch here. Great show. Older 3-gear, never hear, no idea, 2-tier Kia really needs to do some Google research like I did. Earlier in the year, we had 392,000 homes available for sale in this country. That's a record high, 2024, I think up 13% on the previous year, according to Zoopla. Problem is not the volume of stock. The problem is the price of the stock. People like me on less than 100 grand a year as a hard-working Brit have no hope of owning my own home in this country. I feel really, really out of place in this country now. I really do.
And that is a way that an awful lot of people feel. They feel as if they work hard, they pay pretty much 50% in tax, they've got a reasonable income, which means that they can go on holiday a couple of times a year, but they can't afford to put a deposit down on a house because the house prices, particularly the southeast, are just too high.
I mean, it's not just a question of, you know, there not being enough stock. There isn't enough stock, but it's also because it's not in the right place.
But it's not just that, right?
Yeah, it's not. There are many factors. You know, if you go to Wearside or Merseyside, places like that, you will find lots of houses for sale, and for not very much money. And there's a reason for that. People don't want to live there because there are no jobs.
There are no jobs.
Exactly. They're all. And when we say the southeast, we do just mean London, and to a lesser degree, that sort of Oxford, Cambridge arc. They aren't building enough there. So that is, you know, if you look at it in the round, yes, there are lots of houses that are actually, many of them are sitting empty, but they're nowhere near where anybody needs them to be. The prices, of course, are going up because of the competition in the areas that there needs to be. And if you also run a policy of mass migration, that is where people move to. Those people are not, in fact, moving to Wearside or Merseyside to take up those empty houses. They are also coming to London. That's why they're being imported. They're doing it because they'll work for less money. That suppresses wages, which makes it even harder for people. So there's the increased competition for the lower supply, and there's less money to go around. That's, you know, that's what it comes down to.
Do you think there's anybody in government actually having this conversation and going, well, Benedict Spence just said this, so therefore that might be something that we should look into? But they don't seem, it's almost as if they're not aware of it all. I
mean, far more intelligent people than me have said this for a very, very long time in government and been ignored. Ultimately, that's what a lot of this comes down to. And I think you have to remember it's a combination of ideology, which is that, you know, mass migration must always be good, and that is linked to the Treasury, which is the idea that if you just continue to expand the size of the economy, then everything is fine. If you've got more people contributing to society, more people involved in the economy, then by definition it grows. The problem is, of course, the slice of the pie that everybody gets smaller. And you really do have to say, you know, when I can't, was it Dale Vince? It's usually Dale Vince who said the other day that you know, he doubled down on that idea again, that migration is good for our economy. And then you look at the complete lack of growth that there has been in the last decade or more, and you say, right, well, if it is good for our economy, how badly would our economy be doing without this?
Exactly.
And would you not therefore say that rather than continue to bus migrants in, there might be some fundamental issues at the core of our economy that you might want to address, rather than just say, throw more people into the mix?
And just say blindly that, you know, this is a good thing, no matter what kind of, you know, people are coming in. These are people that we must be able to use to do jobs. It's ridiculous.
The desperate irony of all of this is Brexit was, part of it was, of course, about immigration, that people felt that the numbers were too high. But when we were part of the European Union, when it was people coming in from places like Poland, they were far more educated, they were far more skilled, they were far more specialised.
And they were coming here to do a particular job.
Exactly, they were. Now, we have far more people, and they are less specialised. And I tell you what, something else that there is more of, there's a lot more fraud in terms of qualifications. It's actually a lot harder to, you know, to pay somebody in Poland to say, I'm a doctor or something like that, than it is in India. Some places it's actually a roaring trade in being able to do that sort of thing. That is something that you're going to see a lot more of, be it driver's licenses, be it medical qualifications, be it all sorts of things. Huge numbers of people are coming to this country from parts of the world where there simply isn't that kind of scrutiny. And we just shrug and go, oh, well, we need them for our NHS, don't we?
Bonkers, absolutely bonkers. Voice note from Stephen, let's hear it.
Morning, Mike. Just on my way to work, making sure that I pay my taxes. I've actually started to question, who's the mugging all this? Government handing out millions and millions. Foreign aid, putting foreigners up in 4-star hotels. And I'm going to work. I'm having to pay for that. Why don't we have a say where this money goes? This is our money. On a more positive note, happy Friday, Mike. Merry Christmas. Let's get into the swing of things.